Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Friday Council podcast. Today's Friday, the 21st of October, 2022. Another week passed. How's everyone doing?
Great for number 10. Let's go.
Yep, hit double digits. How are you, David? How you doing?
No complaints.
No complaints?
No
yeah,
complaints.
It's pretty good. I think your mic just might be a bit low, but...
Oh, I was just too far away.
Oh, okay. All
It's
good.
all right. I'll get way closer.
Sounds good.
What are we doing for our big number 10 double digits?
We decided earlier this week that we would dab in the topic of alcohol in New Zealand. Not specifically New Zealand, but just alcohol as a
culture, or
as a culture phenomenon.
In the West, really. Probably just in the Western countries.
So I think first off, maybe the first question to ask everyone's stance on alcohol. Are you for it, against it for the most part? How often do you drink it, both of you?
Not often at all for me.
Not
Very
often
rarely.
anymore.
Yeah.
Times a year. Less than 5 times a year, probably.
Yeah, probably me. Probably
About 5.
drink like once every quarter or so. Like, and even then it'd be like one beer.
Pussy. That's part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I'm all for it though, and like we'll get into, I'm sure. But I'm more and more leaning towards, without having fully thought about through very heavily, but just the legalization of all drugs and looking at drugs as what they are, which is like just a tool, like outside of yourself, that can be used for good or evil. Yeah, but what is your opinion on then?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to that. I personally think that alcohol is like a pretty terrible drug, but I'm all for personal freedom, so I wouldn't be saying ban it. I'd be saying maybe have some more education around it, and I think even better have some less harmful alternatives accessible.
Yeah, accessible. It immediately jumps to the not the drug itself, but the like its connotations and regulations and laws that are imposed over it. And yeah, I know we have a pretty liberal stance on all drugs, but when it is legalized in the way it is and advertised and so prevalent throughout, just as like the caffeine is, and like you could argue porn as a drug, it just makes everyone think of it not so much as a drug when it's legalized.
I think the fact that we say alcohol and drugs, or drugs and alcohol,
drugs and alcohol,
which is crazy. Like, there's no difference. Alcohol is a drug.
Yeah.
So that just goes to sort of show the level of brainwashing, or what do you want to call it? The marketing has been to make us separate alcohol from other drugs, even though statistically alcohol is one of, if not the most harmful drug. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think also there's a difference between, like we say, like drinking culture. There's a difference again between like a binge drinking and just a drinking culture. But I'd wager to say that like binge drinking is just a young person thing, something you do to just test your limits. I don't know if you guys disagree, but I'd say all young people will go, and all countries will go through a binge drinking phase. I think. I don't know if New Zealand's particularly that special, or maybe we've just named it specifically.
It's a hard one. I mean, I definitely grew up knowing people that would, binge alcohol quite a bit. I would never think the most as a teenager, maybe like 17 or 18, like 3 nights I drank in a row, which was like unheard of to think of now. But it was, like we had a long weekend. I think it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday after school. But I don't know if it's just a New Zealand thing or if it's...
I don't think it's just a New Zealand thing, but I think it's probably quite prevalent here, probably one of the worst, up there with maybe Australia and UK as 2 others off the top of my head.
Do you think that it would be just New Zealand could just have a general drug abuse, more of a drug abuse problem, or more likely to suffer from drug abuse, our individuals, our people?
I don't know. I just think it's been something that has sort of gone hand in hand with, like, quote, having a good time. Like, a lot of people,
It does.
yeah, they sort of link it together, like, oh, you can't have a good time unless you go out or unless you have a drink. You know, they call it, like, liquid courage. So often, you know, if you're going out, we're trying to meet somebody, you know, having a drink or a shot beforehand, like, just, you know, gives you that little bit of a kick.
Yeah. I
Or
love
loosens
it
the
for that
senses.
reason. Yeah. I actually I love all drugs equally. I don't see color.
Well, speaking of alcohol, though, do you have, like, a favorite type? Like, would it beer, wine, or
Spirits,
what
just
would your
functional.
choice of drink be?
Mine, just whatever's highest percentage, just functional. Like, I really see it as like a utility, as a
Right.
tool to, like.
So you're looking
it's-
at percentages. And
Yeah, I'm looking at
numbers.
percentages and just
Okay.
the quickest, easiest way to get the effect that I want from the drug.
So I look at it from a different perspective. For me personally, anyway,
Mm.
like it's more of like a taste before, I guess, consequences sort of thing. So, like, if I was to have a choice of what sort of alcohol I'd consume, probably like Bailey's, because I like the like creamy,
It's juicy.
yeah, or
But-
or like a nice flavored spirit with Coke or something.
I always think, like, I don't know if anyone could. Well, if I put this hypothetical to everyone, say, like, your favorite non-alcoholic drink and your favorite alcoholic drink, I feel like your favorite non-alcoholic drink is going to taste better. I don't know. And then if
Right.
theoretically they both got you fucked up, messed up, fucked up,
Yeah.
then wouldn't you always, like, you'd rather like a plain lemonade to like a vodka lemonade? Like, a plain lemonade tastes better than a vodka lemonade.
Yes
maybe
and
that's
no.
just
Well,
me.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, some of these drinks out there, these vodka cruisers and long whites and stuff, taste pretty good.
But better than the imitation flavor that they're going for, like raspberry.
Well, I had like an alcoholic ginger beer once, and I couldn't.
Yeah, I had one of those
couldn't
too. That
even
was great.
taste the alcohol. Like, it was almost the same as ginger beer. But
Almost.
But I know. Yeah, I guess I know what you're saying.
Yeah. It's a
yeah,
trade-off between taste and functionality.
Well,
I think,
yeah, a little
usually.
bit of both, I guess. Maybe that's just because I don't drink enough. So it's like I wouldn't, like, when I do, usually you can point out, like, oh, yeah, that's got alcohol in it. But, like, if I do drink, like, for me, yeah, it's probably more the taste, because I wouldn't usually drink to get, like, drunk. Like, I see a lot of people, you know, live for the weekend, like, oh, yeah, we're going to get drunk this weekend, or we're going to party on, like, bring a box around or whatever. But, like, for me, I think thinking about how many times have I been drunk the past couple of years, probably like 2 times in total. Once when we went overseas in Vegas, and for my stag do, and that's like the only time, like, in the past couple of years I can think. But where you guys, you've been?
Yeah, it's about
It's
this.
really-
It's a bit more, definitely a bit more, but it's more. It's like, I think of it like, if you love it, and I do as well. Like, what's stopping me from doing it every single day? Like, just because I love it all day, every single day, and it's because of the negative consequences that you come from it. So maybe my balance and my, like, values, my balance of what I'm willing to suffer for how often I do it is maybe is quite a bit less than most people, especially people who love the drug, which is I like other drugs much more than other people, and it's just, I think a lot of it is down to what your, like, natural proclivity is, genetics or your upbringing.
Yeah. Well, I
But-
say upbringing. Like, did you come from a family that drank a lot,
Nah.
or
Parents, not really. I'd say that my siblings fairly like similar habits to mine. Drank a lot when they were early 20s, teens, and then grew out of it for the most part, which is kind of the point that I'm getting to as well, late 20s. But my parents hardly ever drink.
yeah, same for me. Like, I've never really seen that I can think of my parents ever
Yeah.
drunk at all. But then, like, Dad's told me some stories of when he was probably our age, things that he got up to.
Yeah. My parents are pretty square.
Well,
A
it's
couple
kinda-
of squares, proud squares, to be honest. But
Yeah.
equally, yeah. Dad had some loose times, but it's just the unfair advantage that alcohol gets that, like, doesn't like grind my gears. I don't know, you guys, it's just, and like how it gets that separation from other drugs, and it totally warps like people's opinions and attitudes to it, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe that's like the social harm that it does. That it's like there's always, there's something. I'm just trying to think of an example, but it's like we used to have the privilege in high school and year 13 leaving to go like get food or something, and all it takes is one bad person to ruin that for everybody. Whereas it'd be like the same thing with alcohol. If you hear like multiple stories of harm or violence or whatever, like then of course it brings a stigma around it. But
I'd say that like alcohol holds up pretty well for the damage that it causes, that it doesn't have that much of a stigma. I think like that's the thing, that I can pull up a study here that shows that on a scale of include factors, all sort of harm factors like societal harm, personal harm. Alcohol is by far the most harmful drug when you include all factors, because that's the personal harm. It destroys your body, your liver in particular. But then it leads to violence. It leads to people drink driving. It leads to people just doing reckless things, jumping off buildings or whatever. So when you factor all those in, alcohol is by far the most harmful drug on the planet. And considering that you think it should have a reputation like meth or something, we also associate meth with like carnage, right? But statistically, alcohol is worse than meth. So I'd say that alcohol holds up pretty well without much of a stigma, considering it is so harmful.
Yeah. I wonder as well, hopefully they've accounted for just the fact that that's pretty much all, that's the most commonly used drug as well. So it must be like a per use thing.
Do we think, I'm just a question, is the fact that alcohol being so accessible correlate to why it's so harmful? Like,
that's what
for
I'm
example,
saying.
you can go to the supermarket, 8 a.m. when it opens and buy, I don't know, if maybe like four or six bottles, which sounds like no one really realistically would do that. There might be like the odd person, but it's probably more weird to think of. But then just driving along on my way here, like the amount of alcohol shops, it's so easy to access.
Yeah, that definitely plays a part. It's the fact that it's so accessible. And I think that's the thing. If we sort of just pretend for a moment that we don't know that alcohol exists, and then we discover alcohol tomorrow, there's no way it's legal. There's no way it's legal, considering all the other drugs that are illegal.
Yeah.
It would have a terrible reputation, and it's just sort of the fact that somehow, and obviously it did used to be illegal at one point in history, and I don't think that's a solution, because as we all know, that failed miserably. But yeah, I think if alcohol was discovered tomorrow, it would have a very negative reputation. It's sort of just, I think, the term is it's being grandfathered in, that it just
it's so ingrained. It'd be like taking away cars from people, almost. It'd be like, no, they're too dangerous. They're killing
it's so
people.
ingrained in society, and that it just has such like that lacks your reputation, where it's just considered normal to get smashed as a teenager and things like that. That's the equivalent. Like when you go and get hammered and like drink like 12 beers or something in a night, that's the equivalent of like smashing through like a gram of meth or something. I don't know the equivalent, but it would be the equivalent of like doing copious amounts of other harmful drugs, which we would all be like, geez, that's not a good idea.
I think it just goes to show the level of risk that the society in general, but most individuals are willing to tolerate, and it's like higher than maybe some people would expect. But like when with the studies and all that, it brings to mind the common thoughts towards like pot smokers, traditionally being like super lazy and dumb, and obviously it's kind of elementary science review. But when you're like, okay, but is it the drug that's doing that, or is it just the people? And a lot of times there's bound to be underlying issues with a lot of drugs. I think they magnify like your current subconscious state.
I've seen that with can't remember the exact like details of that, but that came out. It was a study or an article or something in New Zealand recently where they were like linking marijuana consumption with teenage suicides or something. But that's that classic case. Of course, if they're a teenage depressed, they're more likely to experiment with drugs like cannabis because they're seeking relief. So of course, yeah, it's that cat. What is it? The chicken egg thing.
Yes,
It's like yeah. So it looks like, oh well, look, like there's a correlation between marijuana use in teenagers and suicide. Therefore, it must be the cannabis causing them to commit suicide. But no, it's probably the fact that they're depressed, therefore they're more likely to use cannabis than a non-depressed teenager, and therefore,
Is it the? Sorry, I just found this out. Teenagers' death prompts warning from coroner about cannabis use and
might be that.
suicidal
Could
fear.
be that.
Yeah.
And I remember reading it and I was just like, this is so stupid because, it's looking at it from
Yeah. Also, I reckon there's another point that, I don't know, people we all don't think about as a society, but the interplay between alcohol being so damaging physically as a drug and so available, and then contrasted with the illegality of cannabis and its relative lack of harm that it does. And that's also links into the cannabis being a gateway drug supposedly, and the chicken or the egg is like, well, maybe that people are just they're experimenters by nature, so they were always, cannabis is just the easiest first one to go to.
But I would argue there right off the bat anyway, like there may be some truth to that, cannabis being a gateway drug, but in my experience, like alcohol is the ultimate gateway drug because when you're drunk, you don't give a shit.
You'd be doing MDMA.
You'll happily try something that you wouldn't try when you're sober because your inhibitions are way down. Whereas, again, I can only speak personally, but when I smoke cannabis, I'm much more sort of paranoid or I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm just going to try meth now.
Yeah.
But that'll be a possibility if I was really drunk and someone just had a pipe and they're like, oh bro, it's nothing, try it, and I'm really drunk, I might do it because I'm not thinking straight. So to me, alcohol is the ultimate gateway drug.
And the illegality of cannabis is like a lot of government interventions, it makes things worse. You know, if you're a kid and you're gonna go find and buy some cannabis because it's illegal, and you do it and realize that this was fine, I don't have a hangover the next day, then that is gonna make you question, consciously or not, maybe all the other drugs that I've been told are bad and illegal and no, are not so bad.
And
so
also
kind of creating the problem as well.
Yeah, well, and if you're buying cannabis from some shady drug dealer, it's not to say all drug dealers are shady, but there are certainly a lot of them, then they might be inclined to be, well, you tried cannabis, now do you want to try this meth? It's way better. And whereas if it were legalized and you were buying it from a reputable place, and it was fully regulated, that's not going to happen. So naturally, when drugs are in an underground market, there's a higher chance of you being led. And we've all heard the stories of laced cannabis and stuff like that. So if you're buying it from in some black market, there's a higher chance that it could lead to other problems that wouldn't occur if it were regulated.
Yeah.
And you get that more so with harder drugs than cannabis. Like just recently, it's a big thing in the United States, but that just happened here for the first time recently where people thought they were buying cocaine, but they're buying fentanyl. And that can go horribly wrong when you think you're buying something and it's another drug and the dosages are completely different. And, I think like 12 people ended up in hospital. Very lucky that no one died because that can go pear-shaped real quickly with fentanyl.
And that doesn't happen in a legalised market. You're not going to find...
Exactly.
You're very unlikely to find fentanyl in some alcohol.
No, exactly. That's the thing.
Sold in a shop.
In my opinion, that's the thing. Most drugs should be legalised because it's not we're saying, oh, they're harmless and gung-ho, have at it. It's to say, well, people are going to get their hands on this crap anyway. It's better that they get them from a reputable source with a warning sheet rather than getting it from some shady gang dealer who doesn't give
says it's all good.
Yeah, and doesn't give
good,
and there's
bro.
no
It's
quality control, and it's much better that we say people are going to dabble in this stuff, so it's better that they get it the best stuff, the least tarnished stuff.
Yeah.
And a set of instructions and advice.
But I also reckon that when you're abusing a drug abuse, you're either like stupid, like real low IQ, or there's something else that's like some trauma that you have that you're feeling, which is the classic like cereal
like
box.
Chasing the high sort of thing. Or?
Not even chasing the high, but like you feel like if you like didn't. What's the drug that supposedly feels like a warm? It's like apparently heroin. it feels like a hug, like a warm hug. And a lot of people who
it replaces,
struggle with heroin addiction had traumatic childhoods and didn't experience that like unconditional love, and they're basically buying that.
And that
them.
ties into like what I was saying about that cannabis teenager suicide correlation is that people who have trauma or whatever negative experiences in their life, depression, PTSD, whatever it is, a bad breakup, they're more likely to seek out these things to make the pain go away.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean, and of course it's not to say that these drugs are harmless. They're not, and that includes cannabis. It's not harmless. I think it's less harmful than alcohol, and that's statistically, it can be proven statistically. But just because someone uses it and then we say, oh, look, these cannabis users are committing suicide, it could be because of the underlying issue that made them more likely to use cannabis. And they were always more susceptible to committing suicide.
Yeah, I think it's spot on, and I'm reminded now of the other legal drug of nicotine and cigarettes. That I was warned, like I had a few family members and who everyone knows someone who's smoked a lot or tried to quit and couldn't or whatever, or still smokes a lot, and I was strongly warned to not ever do
Even
one,
try-
not even
yeah,
try one,
don't
because
even
they're so
bother.
addictive though, and that's not coming from experience. The advice wasn't coming from experience, but try plenty, smoke
I
plenty,
know.
and it's like,
I get
it,
just
but like not for me.
Massive disclaimer: we're not saying go out and try smoking. It's risk free and
Well-
non-addictive. Clearly, it is on a population basis, it is highly addictive. But personally, in my case, I've tried cigarettes and never felt
think
addicted. But
it's actually the
some people
million other chemicals that are in cigarettes, not the nicotine, that do a lot of the physical damage. Nicotine's addictive.
nicotine's not. I think nicotine's actually technically can be considered neuroprotective. I think it like decreases the chance of
it's a
Alzheimer's
nootropic.
and stuff like that. But the method of it getting to you with all the tar and
you
that
get
sort of
gum or
things.
something.
You gum.
Or
Well, now you
technically-
can have like vapes that have
and it's
nicotine in it.
early days of vaping. Apparently, it's safer.
Yeah.
But it's early days. I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years the studies come out that say it's less harmful than smoking, but it's not harmless.
Yeah. You were saying like, we're not suggesting you go out and try blah, blah, blah. But I want to say that in high school, I'm sure we all, or high school or primary or intermediate, we would have had a drug, someone.
Is it like deer?
Yeah, some form of that.
Yeah.
It was one form of that or another. And I always felt their message was like real out of touch.
Yeah.
I'd never done anything at that stage, barely even drunk, but I was like, this is so like cringe and
It's
out of
almost
touch.
like trying to scare you, which has its purpose, obviously.
Like,
but
I feel like the only people it's convincing are like squares
Yeah.
who are like massive nerds
nerds.
anyway, who weren't ever going to go crazy. But their slogan for the one that came to Shirley was not even once.
Yeah,
Blah,
that
blah,
was
blah.
yeah, we had that too.
you had the same
that's a
one.
common one, I think.
Yeah, and I thought I was real funny by going, nah, boys, not even twice. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to try everything once. But ironically, it's kind of proven to be a not bad mantra to live by, the not even twice. So
I feel like they would show
even
you.
if I don't think I'm going to enjoy something, this is not just for drugs, but for any experience, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like this. I'll try it once. And I feel like that's much more healthy while weighing up the consequences and whatnot. But it's a much more healthy attitude than just celibacy from them. And then, what are you guys thinking about that before I go on?
Yeah,
well,
in
it depends how you
general,
look at it.
but I think, I'm probably not going to tell people to go out and experiment with meth.
Generally, if you know yourself, and for me personally, like I know that I do have some like addictive like tendencies. So if you pick up on like something that I enjoy, like the itch to want to keep doing it or wanting to try
intensify it.
Intensify it. We were talking about like cigarettes before, because I mean obviously I have smoked cigarettes before, but that's one thing that I would find like I never felt like I needed to keep going, or it was just I could stop when I wanted to stop. I see why people enjoy it, but it was never a thing for me.
I'll say the only time I've ever felt addicted to cigarettes is when I'm drunk.
Yeah, it's real common.
And it's not that
I'm the
I
same.
feel addicted, but I crave them. That's the only time I crave them, so it's more binge rather than addiction.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm drunk, oh man, I just can smoke like a train.
Yeah.
And then if I'm sober, I've had this like
Makes them taste better.
the
for
last
one.
time I smoked when I was sober, I had 2 in a row, and I felt sick as. Whereas
When you drink,
no, when I was sober,
yeah,
but
but-
when I'm drunk, I could
yeah.
have 10 in a row, and I wouldn't. I'd be able, just be able to keep going.
The thing with the cigarettes as well, I didn't like feel any physiological effects, but I would have them at a little shout out dark rooms in Asif Street, epic little venue. That would have looked epic, by the way. I always thought when smoking was legal, with a like real dingy like layer of smoke in the ceiling. But going out, you'd go out in the alley, and it was real obviously a social aspect to the smoking, which is my favorite bit of it. And also like as a teenager, you feel like edgy, and whatnot. But that's again like maybe that's what gets a lot of people in to smoking cigarettes is the like
I think
community, and you're like
there's
you're all
certainly-
chatting, you're not on your phones.
There's certainly
And you're sharing lights,
There's something to that. Yeah.
I just wanted to touch base because you asked before, like what we thought about the whole, like I was like trying
Not even
once.
twice.
Yeah, not even twice.
That's
Thing
mine,
you're
Daniel.
saying.
Coined Daniel.
Like it reminded me, there's a channel on YouTube, like a Dutch channel called Drugs Lab, and they explain, and they even have people like consuming the drug and explaining like the effects of it, like the science behind it, what it does to you, like how long the high, what basically what you experience. So in that sense, it's like an educational sense. So I'm not saying advocate for like try every single drug, and realistically, as you grow up and you leave high school and you trying new things and experiencing, like you're probably gonna come into contact with drugs or alcohol will be available to you. Not saying go for it, but like if you are, like at least do it in a controlled sense, and maybe have some knowledge and do some research as opposed to trying. But yeah, like what David's saying, like the times when you have drink alcohol and you have been drunk, for the most part, like you almost feel invincible. Like you could just
Great times.
take on
Great times.
anything.
It's such a good drug. I love alcohol.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I love
is
it.
Maybe just for me, like the negative. Well, as I got older, like the negatives of drinking alcohol just far outweigh the positives to the point where it's like I don't.
And that's gonna be different for every single individual.
Whereas I see people that go out drinking like every weekend, and for me it's like, oh man, I just couldn't fathom anything worse than doing that. Like my weekends are so valuable to me now. Like that being said, like I have had times where I enjoyed drinking, and like growing up in younger early 20s and late teens, like where alcohol's been like
Yeah, I can
really
I can see
enhance like your experience.
I'm all for it. People going like, if you want to drink every weekend, all good. Life completely. I've
Yeah,
been
well,
drunk.
totally.
I know
It's
how
up
it
to you.
feels. And if you want to repeat that every weekend, and it's worth it, the negative effects on your body and the day after are worth it, then go for it.
Just a side question. Speaking of being drunk, from what we remember, sometimes alcohol can tamper your memory. But do you have like a favorite time or experience, or
Not one.
not one, or maybe even a couple?
No.
Don't think so. Not specific.
The highlights would be like the success with the ladies when I'm drinking. It seems like they obviously are way more impressed by way more stupid shit, as everyone is when they're on alcohol. But
Is that because they were also under
yeah, exactly.
influence of alcohol?
Everyone's drunk, so like
Yeah.
dumbass shit is funny. But yeah, like liquid courage, it's everyone can. I'm assuming everyone feels that feeling of liquid courage. But again, I think that's just from a removal of your inhibitions, and then like some people say, oh, so and so drink makes me angry or aggressive,
Yeah,
and
like
I can't
drinking
drink
red wine
Yeah,
or
I can't
something.
drink that because it makes me so
complete
and so.
BS.
Yeah, I'm
complete
skeptical.
BS.
But-
Absolute BS.
But the origin of the word spirit is a metaphysical. They're supposed to contain, because I distilled down, so it's supposed to contain like the pure spirit of whatever you've got it from, which is interesting. If people think it makes them do different things based on which spirit they're intaking into their body. But I forgot what I was going to say.
It's just complete bullshit.
You reckon?
It's all the same thing. It's all ethanol. It's
Yeah.
complete BS. Yeah,
So
there's going to be a placebo effect if you tell yourself that.
Yeah,
oh,
maybe that's what it is.
Tequila
Yeah.
makes me crazy. Of course, you can psychologically trick yourself into associating that. Oh, I can't drink vodka because I vomit. Yeah, and then it becomes your brain playing tricks on you. But it's purely like on a molecular level, all alcohol is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no difference between tequila or beer or gin.
Yeah.
Obviously, in terms of the actual like calories and makeup of it, there is, but the active substance is ethanol.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's like the real sugary drinks mixed with alcohol. I think you can drink more, or something to do with the sugar to alcohol ratio changes how fast it hits, obviously, and the longevity of it. But
Also, if you're gonna do like a vortiki as well.
yeah, a vortiki. See, it's like that's fun. Like a vortiki's just, I don't know. The whole drinking culture also gets a bad rap, but like it's just unfairly put in the spotlight as like the only one that is legal for one. So they're saying it's the only really of nicotine and caffeine. It's the only one that you're allowed to do. So it's just like makes it for a warped, unbalanced view on drugs in general. So if they're all legal, obviously I don't care which one you're doing, but the focus should be, like you said before, Nav, on the education and harm reduction.
Yeah.
And that's
So
seems like a
obviously,
logical.
if you're
way to do
gonna drive or something, you should probably never take
Yeah,
any substance.
yeah. Well, I reckon, I think that the limits are obviously made, the drinking limits are obviously made like conservatively quite low, but to be honest, I think if alcohol is kind of tricky because you're not thinking right,
varies
but I
as
reckon
well.
if you know how much you've had to drink and you know you can drive, go for it.
I see. I
That's terrible
completely
advice.
disagree
Yeah.
on that.
That's the problem, because you
I'm gonna call
think
you out
you
on
know,
that.
but that's
Yeah.
the thing. The alcohol is clouding your abilities because it's
Could
that's
be.
the invincibility factor.
Well,
I only
yeah.
had 3. I can drink. Yeah,
Yeah, well, so you get like a tolerance to it. So, say for example, if you smoke weed, if you do it once a month, sort of thing, each time you do it, you're probably going to feel quite blasted. If you start doing it multiple times a week, or even to a daily effect, it takes more generally to get the same buzz or whatever. I don't know if it's the same for drinking, but if like you know your limits and you start getting comfortable with drinking,
Well,
say 5 or 6,
Yeah,
it's like, well, I know my limit,
yeah.
but I guess the science behind it would tell you otherwise.
Well, I reckon I might disagree, because I think to be logically consistent, you'd have to do that with all drugs. Change your thinking, like to not a sober thought. So you'd have to say either for all drugs. You can't say all drugs except alcohol. You can decide for yourself, obviously. And I'm not saying you guys are saying that, but like everyone assumes that the limit set by the government that is for all people. I mean, it's a blood alcohol level, so it's relative, but everyone's okay with that amount of risk. Like obviously one drink is going to increase the risk of a crash, even though you're still under the limit. And I feel like that's a government imposed limit on how drunk someone should be while they're behind the wheel. And obviously it's conservative, but yeah, I think again, you should obviously be punished very severely if you've made the wrong decision and haven't backed yourself. But I think about friends' parents who talk about, oh, back in the day, man, I'd drive home, wake up in the morning, not remember like driving home at all. Like they were wasted. And I think about the amount of people who were driving drunk then versus the amount of actual crashes and deaths.
I don't know. You'd have to bring
Is it-
up stats.
Yeah,
to,
I'd have
to have
to
stats
prove
for
that.
I feel like it was way more normalized to drunk drive back
Yeah,
then.
definitely. It was
Oh,
more
it totally
normalized,
was.
but possibly I would say that crashes were almost certainly higher as well.
Yes. But
Yeah, I think
I'm wondering in terms.
my
this is
dad
fucking
like
edgy.
telling me a story once, like when he was younger, he just woke up one morning and he was up on the Port Hills, like in his car asleep, and he's like no idea how he got there.
Yeah, and I think the amount of people that of the population that would have been doing that would be vastly greater than the proportion of crashes.
Yeah,
This
but
is a gut.
even
Yeah,
one more crash caused by someone driving alcohol is not worth it, is it?
No.
Yeah, but I mean, couldn't you say the same about cars and like people die in cars and we're willing to stick to 50 around?
Yeah,
I'm
but
not
there's
yeah.
there's a difference in the risk reward. There's no need to. What are the benefits of driving drunk? Like that's just
Yeah, okay,
for
that's
your own
true.
enjoyment. Like people need cars to drive to work, do things, productive things.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any like benefits to society from lots of people driving around drunk. That's just a selfish thing. Oh, I want to go out and enjoy myself. So you go, yeah, it's just
Yeah, that is a good point, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually know what the limits are because I don't drink, so I don't really pay much attention. I would probably prefer though that they were more on the conservative end,
definitely.
than the other way around, because that's when you start testing the limit. Like,
yeah.
as you could install like, or you could carry around like a breathalyzer before you drive, sort of thing. But there was always a margin for error for those sort of things.
Yeah.
So I think you're better off having a lower thing, and if people, like, for whatever reason, as you say, it might be a selfish thing, decide to get behind the wheel while drinking, at least they're aware of the limits on the conservative end, so they wouldn't be over as much. Whereas if it was a higher limit, they're like, okay, could be okay, might not be okay.
Yeah.
But equally, I just think if you're gonna drink alcohol, sure, you can drink like one standard drink or whatever and drive is fine, but I just think it's not worth the risk. Like,
It's pretty dangerous. It's pretty dangerous
with fire.
But then again, like, that's coming from a place like, I think I would be more. I feel like my judgment would be around the legal limit anyway. I'm not sure sometimes if I would have been slightly over or not, but I got home fine and felt fine, and yeah. But so there's obviously way more stupid people out there.
Yeah,
and
well,
irresponsible. So you need the law to catch those people.
There was, I think, one of my friends one time like drank alcohol on a Saturday night, slept in his car, woke up, drove the next morning, got pulled over, and he was still over the limit technically. So
Right,
it's
so
like,
he was definitely over.
yeah. So it's
no
it's
doubt
one of those things.
about
You
that.
feel like you might feel fine, but I think David would agree with David. I think it's just a selfish thing. You should probably just never do
Yeah,
it.
you're right. There is no real reason
So
to
maybe
have to drive with Uber and stuff nowadays.
you could potentially, I don't know how you would juggle that in terms of providing alternatives for people who want to get home, because I know how expensive it is to catch an Uber home or a taxi home. You obviously don't want people riding like Lime scooters and stuff like. Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea, but
Yeah, that's got to be the only reason people do drunk drivers. It's got to be to save money, because otherwise,
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's probably
true.
primarily to save money, but I think there are probably just people out there who feel like, in their drunken state, thinking, oh, I'm fine. Like, like this is or even it's like a challenge, like I'm running the gauntlet, like, fuck,
Yeah.
it gives them a little bit of a thrill. I've definitely heard stories like that from some morons in my time, people who it's like a proud thing, like, fuck, I like drove home last night, I can't even remember how I got home, like it's like a cool thing, and it's like, man, it's just so dumb.
I actually
is
quite
wild.
enjoyed being like the designated sober driver. So
I think
Yeah.
this all probably comes down to, like, again, a lack of sort of education thing. Like, there's who really sits down and pre-plans before they go out and get shit-faced how they're going to get home and stuff, right? It's sort of done on the fly at the end of the night. So this is,
that's
Speak for
probably
yourself.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'm-
probably would.
yeah, I'm the opposite. I'll plan well before.
Yeah,
for
I
the ride.
generally like to know, like, if I were to drink, like, how I'm getting home.
I'd be
yeah.
the same, but I think there's a lot of people who don't. It's done on a whim.
Yeah, I
and-
totally agree. Yeah, there's
and you see like
mixture.
plans change, like they're, should we go into town on a spit, like all these things, and then it's probably something that should be sat down and have a clear decision made before you go out, because that's it. When you're drunk, you're not going to be making the best decisions. So if you've pre-planned, then that takes that risk of making a bad decision, or significantly reduces the chance of you making a poor decision at the end of the night, saying, "Oh, we've only had 5. My last drink was 2 hours ago. I should be okay."
Yeah.
Whereas if you've sat down and you've pre-designated someone's driving you home, or you've Ubering or whatever, then it's going to significantly reduce the chances of making a silly decision.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, just because you've driven home drunk a few times and gotten away with it doesn't, like, it's one of those things that eventually you're probably going to fuck up. Like, it doesn't, driving home, you could be like a drunk as, and you're not guaranteed to crash, but if you do it 100 times, 1,000 times, inevitably you're probably going to. So that's the thing, it's that survivorship bias thing where someone thinks, oh, I did it once, I can do it again. And it's like, and then it'll be the 50th time that you do it that you fuck up, and then you run over a cyclist or something, and then that's what I mean. It's not worth even one person dying for that, because there's no. That's the thing. There's no benefits. It's not like, I get the case that you're making.
Because otherwise you could talk about like the whole COVID zero deaths. It's like there's obvious losses as a society to shut down everything.
If there were benefits to driving drunk, then I would agree. You have to have some tolerance where you say, oh well, because this guy.
But then again, you could say that about drinking alcohol in general. Like, there's no reason. Yeah, I mean, other than social, but that's like such a superficial reason, just as superficial as saving money on.
Yeah, I would agree.
So you could say, I would agree. There's no reason to drink in the first place.
Yeah, I would agree, but as long as you're not putting other people in harm's way, then that's fine. Like, I agree that there generally is no purpose to drinking. There's probably no purpose to a lot of things that we do, but we get enjoyment from these sorts of things. And as long as it's just you and you're not harming, whether that be in a car or physical violence, whatever it is, as long as who cares if it's it can be as pointless as anything, but as long as it's just you, people, not affecting someone else's life, that's fine.
Yeah, it's very reasonable.
Well, I'm just going to say, like, if you want to take a box of beers home with you and drink on the weekend, like, enjoy like the rugby or something, but there's nothing stopping you from just doing it without drinking at all. Like, you're still. Obviously, it's just as an enhancement sort of to your senses, sort of thing. Yeah,
you're basically driving a weapon, aren't you, when you're driving a car? So
So I would think it should just be really simplified and just have it as zero tolerance for alcohol. I think it would just clear up sort of, because that's it. There are still going to be people out there who think, maybe I could have one more, or maybe I could wait an hour before driving, limit the way it is.
And I've never been breathalyzed, so I have no idea if I've been driven home over the limit or not.
You've never been stopped like on the road at all?
Not when I have had drinks.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, just simplify it for everyone and just say, no alcohol.
Don't drink and drive.
Yeah, because that's you should be the sharpest of your senses, because that's, like you said, even though you're not completely impaired, there is even one drink, it statistically impairs you a little bit. So that's it. When you're driving a weapon, that's it. You should have to be at the sharpest of your senses.
What about like a sleep measurement?
They
can't force people to have sleep before they drive, and that's true.
It'd be like driving if you, I don't know, because you probably don't wake up very early, but like if you're driving early hours of the morning, like it's probably a dangerous time to drive. The amount of people that just waking up, or they might be having a coffee and feeling buzzy.
I think that's where I'm.
I think is that where you're kind of.
Well, that's where I'm coming from. Like, with the sleep is something that the government doesn't get involved in when it comes to driving, and so it's your own personal judgment whether you are alert enough, sober enough, and that's where I was coming at it. But again, it's like there's a boring middle ground where it's necessary to catch those fuckwits, for lack of a better word, who are going to
there'd be
drive
cases
wasted.
Like two wrongs don't make a right. So obviously you can't measure sleep. Look, it should.
I'm sure you could.
Oh, you can personally, but a cop can't, like, unless he gets you out of the car and does you through whatever one of those tests. And even then, if there was a way to easily detect if you were impaired because you had a lack of sleep, as you can for alcohol, then that should be a thing, but it's not a thing. So, and then just because you can't do that doesn't mean say, oh, well, you could be driving on no sleep, which is just as bad as being slightly drunk. So therefore we should just allow people to drive slightly drunk. No, it should be, we can easily detect alcohol. If we could easily detect lack of sleep, then that should be enforced as well, but we just have to accept that, unfortunately. We can't easily do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know if it is possible or not.
It's just not easily going to be, is it? Yeah, because you could personally, if you have a smartwatch or a ring or whatever, you can detect your sleep quality and stuff. But like a cop can't easily. Yeah. Like it's.
They could test the level of melatonin and serotonin, which changes, or one of those.
But how are you going to do that? Take you into hospital? That's what I mean. Like, there's no easy way.
You can't just stop people over for the sake of it. Like,
it's much harder. Like alcohol is an easy one to, and even other drugs are hard to test for.
Yeah,
like,
I was going to say.
So like alcohol is just a particularly easy one.
Yes.
So it makes that easy.
Like there's no test for driving under the influence in cannabis, is it? They just do the walking in a line.
I think that
I
might
think in
become,
Australia they have something
it's
like
fairly
that.
new. It's novel, but
Is it
it's in the
saliva?
it might be.
It might be saliva.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's still, it's nowhere near as sort of proven as the breathalyzer, which clearly works. It's so that's if there were easy ways to test for any other sorts of impairment, I'd be all for that. But yeah, if a lot of these impairments, it's very hard to test for it. Same with like there's a lot of like cocaine or whatever, although arguably
Going
cocaine
to make you a better driver.
I wouldn't say better, but less impairing than alcohol.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like ketamine or something. You probably can't test for ketamine, and if you're in a K-hole, you probably shouldn't be driving.
Well, it's like, for the most part, like the amount of people driving on the roads, like you can't police every person every time, like
Without mass surveillance.
without mass surveillance. Yeah,
I know a stupid one that I've seen a video of. It was people doing freaking NANGs, nitrous oxide. I think I saw it on one of those police TV shows that was in the United States. So she was fucking doing whippets, NANGs,
While
nitrous
driving.
oxide while driving. Now that's a really stupid idea.
Yeah, that is a real
But there's
stupid
no,
idea.
it was just, I think the cop must have seen the balloon and been like, this is weird. Like, why
That
is
is crazy
But
gnarly.
that, and especially considering like the physical actions of preparing that while you're driving, there's a double dose of the fact that you're gonna have the psychological impairment as well as the fact that you're using your hands off the steering wheel and eyes off the steering wheel to prepare it. That's like incredibly stupid. But unless you're caught in the act of doing that, you wouldn't be able to test for
No,
So
it's gone so fast.
Side question: how do you feel? Say, for example, if we had self-driving cars, like like a Tesla, to the point where it would be okay to be behind the wheel technically.
You're supposed to be alert, aren't you, in those things?
at the moment you are.
Right.
Yeah.
At the moment.
If it got to a point where it was flawless, then obviously it wouldn't matter, would it? But I think at the moment, my understanding is that, the driver still needs to be alert. I think you even still have to have your hand on the steering wheel.
It's very easy to just, like, if you have it in self-driving mode or whatever, but you have to put your hands on the wheel every 20 seconds. Well, that's pretty easy to do sober or
asleep.
Yeah, but it's
Asleep.
probably
Or
for
yeah.
a purpose. The purpose is that if something goes wrong, that you can quickly intervene. So I assume it's around that. It's not just for the sake of
As
having
soon as
your
there are
hands on the
self-driving
steering
cars,
wheel.
people are going to be sleeping. Straight up sleeping. I reckon the sunny's on, so the cops won't tell. They're just going to be straight up sleeping.
If it's flawless, then it would be like catching the bus or just being a passenger, wouldn't it? So if it does get to that point, then that'll be fine. But I don't think we're at that point yet.
No, definitely not. Oh, man can dream though. How sick that can be. We've kind of talked about it, or roughly related to this, but something else that is also alongside the not even twice mantra, but we talked about drugs, the term drugs and alcohol, when alcohol is a drug, and it just like muddies the waters and ruins like people's attitudes towards it. It just makes people way more careless, I think, about it.
Yep.
And to combat that carelessness, I've found that including expanding my scope of what I consider a drug has really helped me in my life. So I've always I do enjoy Love Island, right? The TV show. But I consider it a drug in that it's like I'm ingesting it. And considering a drug is anything that is ingested into my body and makes me feel a certain way. So like Love Island is like candy, candy is also like a drug, I consider. Pornography, also a drug. That's a pretty explicitly clear one, So I think that treating everything you do like that, even exercise, is a drug. I want to feel this way, I'll go do this, even though you're not really ingesting anything. But I just think that's a really good way for me, at least, to live my life. What do you guys think about that attitude in terms of like considering TV shows, food, drugs, sex a drug, and then all the typical things that you're going to put into your body explicitly, not just
I
and
think
music is a drug.
Yeah, I'd say even if those things, I think probably some of those things technically aren't drugs, but treating them as though, essentially you're changing things in your brain. Yeah, essentially,
again,
you're looking for a chemical.
It's a definitional
reaction.
thing. Like,
You're looking for a chemical reaction in your brain. So anything you do that can alter what's happening in your brain.
Yeah, that's to anyone listening. That's like kind of my logic between the absurdity of the government being so decisive as to which ones we're allowed and which ones we aren't. That clearly isn't based in health and safety science.
Definitely not.
It just kind of makes me take an L, pisses me off a little bit.
I think, I sort of agree with what you're saying. Some of those things that you mentioned, like pornography, for example, like you could argue, and I think some studies have said the negatives of watching it. In terms of like, I guess how you function, like it will affect like your libido, for example, or it might affect you being able to talk or communicate with a member of the opposite sex. Like, then in that sense, like, well, those sort of things you can probably have like a boring middle ground where it's all about moderation and how you consume or whatever. So I'm not singling out pornography, but like alcohol, yeah, sure. There's probably negatives to it, but at the same time, if you use it in the right capacity, it's fine. Same for, you could argue for smoking weed or, like exercise. Like exercise is a good example because people can abuse it to the point where, it becomes like a drug and you're going to the gym, whatever, like 2 hours, 8 hours a day if you're Rich Piana.
It's like people who quit cigarettes and then they take something else. They're addicted to something else that is more healthy, but they're still addicted, and it's
but I guess
which is not healthy.
Good thing to treat it like that, where it's like in moderation. And generally, if you know yourself well enough, you know what's the best function or how to use X, Y, Z for the right purpose. But that being said, it's very easy like to be manipulated or to, I guess, become addicted and abuse it.
Yeah, and that's why I also think important to experiment on yourself as well. If the slightest doubt that, or the slightest inclination that you might be becoming addicted or it's changed you on a day-to-day basis, some certain drug, I'm talking about drug as in inclusive of TV series or addicted to what was the other one? Sugar, like food. I forgot what I was going. Basically experimenting with yourself to learn which combinations and which like amounts and capacity you yourself as an individual have to deal with these drugs, and that should definitely be a deeply personal thing with no external or societal pressures based on which drug you're choosing to play with. I generally agree with that, but I think that's where New Zealand and speak for New Zealand and knowing personally, where a lot of people have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and that's, I feel like, because it's legal and so widely accepted and you're separated from drugs and alcohol. So it's sort of, people don't realize just how harmful it is, and probably a lot of people who sort of don't grow out of that binge drinking phase will inevitably end up finding out in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, when they get problems, big serious problems. But even a lot of people probably just don't even realize on a sort of lower level just how it becomes like a crutch that you can only go out if you're drunk, and I can only talk to girls if I'm drunk, and I can only have fun if I'm drunk. That's actually quite a serious issue, because that essentially is like an addiction. I remember you saying that, I think something that you just articulated, something that everyone feels, is that like when you're drinking, the common assumption is that the drinking just lets your true self out. You're not in you don't have any inhibitions, and so that's what makes you more confident. And you're like, I'm just like, at my core, I'm this like brazen, macho, like loud person. That must be what I'm like at my core. And then realizing that actually no.
no.
Is that?
Yeah, that's
kinda
what
just told
I
me.
said. Yeah, I had that experience of alcohol where I felt that, as you all know, I'm an introvert, and then when I get shit faced, I'm a massive extrovert, as I think everyone is when they get shit faced. And I kept thinking to myself, this is who I really am. And then that became like a massive conflict in my life, because the next day, when that feeling's gone of invincibility and, being the most social person in the world, and how am I ever going to like see these people, again, because they're going to expect me to be like this loud, outspoken, confident, guy, when it's like, I can only see these people when I'm drunk, because I didn't feel that I could show my real self. Well, again, that's because I thought my real self was when it's drunk, but I've come to realize that was not the case at all.
Yeah.
That the person I was when I was drunk was, a chemically induced person.
Yeah.
What
do you guys reckon about, since it is so pervasive, it's like the most common drug in our society, when us personally, or when you're someone who doesn't want to, or doesn't even feel like it at the time, like me, like I'm all for it, love the drug, but definitely don't feel like doing it as much as a lot of other people do, the like feeling that societal pressure to do it, which everyone will have felt, how do you think that affects people going up with that, and then being sober around other people, usually most people, if it's an event or something, that are drunk? I'd like to say it's not as bad. It's not as scary as it sounds.
It's not scary. I don't think it is, personally, because for me,
some people really struggle with it, apparently.
Yeah, totally. And I can see why. Like, I used to go, well, at least for the past few years, going to parties, like I would always be the designated sober driver. There are two reasons for that. One, because you earn a little extra pocket money driving people home, which pay for petrol.
Yeah.
And two, like, I just got to a point where alcohol for me wasn't as enjoyable. Yeah. But I still, like, found it funny, like, or fun hanging out with people. And, it's obviously entertaining seeing, like, drunk or people under the influence of alcohol doing silly things and making a fool of themselves. But I never struggled personally to like communicate or talk to people. Like, some people would say like, oh, why aren't you drinking? And it's like, I just don't feel like drinking. And like, there will be people that, oh, come on, have a drink. But generally, like, if you're more comfortable in your own skin, like, just being okay with it, then it shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter what other people think.
Yeah.
And if they don't want you there because you're not drinking, well, nice, like, stuff them, like.
They're not your real friends.
Yeah, they're not your real friends. I mean, I probably wouldn't put myself in positions like that now. It's like if people just go in the bar or whatever, hang out to drink. Like if I'm viewing it more from a social sense, like, just wanting to catch up with people, sure. But if it's like going out specifically to drink or get drunk, I just won't even bother putting myself in that position.
Yeah, I think that's like kind of the ridiculous thing, as I'm saying, is that I don't think we view alcohol or take it serious enough, and that we get this peer pressure. Oh, don't be a pussy, have a drink, have 5 drinks, have a beer bong,
Or tiki.
Yeah, like scull it. That's like, it's like we're treating it like it's a joke, but that's what I mean. That isn't a joke. And then, you see, we all see it. You go to parties and multiple people vomit. Well, that can't be good for you, that you're drinking to a point that you need to vomit, right? If you
Definitely not.
Yeah, so like,
but then you've got to go again.
Yeah, that's
you're like you're back to 3 drinks ago.
The craziest. That's the craziest thing to me is that people like, rather than take that as a message, well, this is enough for the night, they say, oh no, now I just can go again, and like, that's not good.
Well, the environment too, like, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but just the environment that I was in, is if you ever went to like call it like pre-drinks, the sole aim of pre-drinks is to drink as much as you can to for the most part, to save yourself money, so you're not buying as many drinks if you go out to to town or whatever. So you're basically just drinking to consumption.
Pre-drinks is my favourite part.
Well, you get there and it's like, man, I need to get another one in before, like, I'm starting to sober up, and it's like you take it back off again. But like, it's it's not.
Yeah, I think this is where we need. That's what I mean, is that we think nothing of that, but just that's where we need to change our thinking. And like, if that was cocaine or meth, would we say, let's come on, let's another one, another hit, another line? We'd all someone would sort of be like, geez, that guy's got an unhealthy habit. He's like constantly doing cocaine. But that's the thing with alcohol. It's just commonly accepted. That's just a normal thing to just nick all these drinks, vomit, drink again. Yeah. When that's what that's because we're so conditioned to think that alcohol isn't a drug. And that's what I mean. I think if you substitute any other drug in there and people like are just binging it, we would all recognize that was problematic.
Yeah. I also think that it's a good thing that the stats of young people drinking is going way down.
That's
but
really good.
Obviously, there's going to be more who are just straight up sober, but there's definitely a lot of younger people who are just switching to other drugs as they're becoming more available with online and whatnot. And I actually think it's a good thing, diversifying, because you're not, what are the chances that alcohol is going to be your favorite drug? So experimenting as well and not feeling the pressure to just conform to the single legal one is a real good thing, I think. And it, like mine, not even twice. I'm saying, like, shop around. Like, this one's pretty like demonstrably bad for your health.
Yeah,
it might be worth it. The effects might be worth it, as it is for many, many people. A lot of smart people know how bad alcohol is for their body, but they've decided it's worth it and it's good for them. But you got to experiment, man.
Yeah,
you got to shop around. There's way less physically harmful drugs.
I think that's it, and that's the sort of conservative argument against like legalizing other drugs is, more people are going to use these drugs, so that's why we don't want them legalized. But the other way to flip it is if we have a proper scientific committee or whatever who decide on a handful of drugs that we're going to legalize because have quite favorable risk profiles. Yeah, more people are going to use them, but then less people are going to use alcohol, which to me is a bigger benefit, because alcohol is clearly, I think, is one of the biggest sort of harms in Western society. And so more people that we get off alcohol, and if they're using safer substitutes, that's better than these few sober people who would never have otherwise tried ketamine or whatever, mushrooms. Because, again, and that's the thing, arguably these things, some drugs can have like the positive experiences, so it's actually not necessarily a bad thing. If people who otherwise wouldn't use them are now using them because they're legal.
And
it's like, as I say, like there's a good study out there in the UK that sort of profiles all these drugs on risk profiles and a number of factors: personal harm, societal harm, and various other factors like impairment and stuff. And there's a number of drugs which are obviously you can't say they're harmless, but the risk profile relative to alcohol is a fraction. If we say that alcohol is a 99 out of 100 on a danger rating, there's some drugs that are like 5 or 6s on that scale.
For sure.
So they cause very little harm to the user and almost no harm to society. So it
seems like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. So I think it's a bigger benefit if we have a bunch of alternatives, so that less people drink alcohol, and even if that results in a few people who would not have tried these drugs if they weren't legal trying them.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, it's a hard thing as well, trying to have that like middle ground balance where it's like, if most people, I say most people, but yeah, like there's the huge argument that we know that alcohol is not say dangerous, but like the effects of alcohol and social harm and so prevalent, but equally it's like a normalized thing. So like, I was thinking, an example, if you went to like a sports game, for example, like a rugby game, you'll have families there, but you also have people that go there and drink excessively. But it's kind of like normalized.
It's huge,
which is
sports.
Yeah, it's huge in sports. Well,
I think it's good for sports.
Yeah,
for
like
a crowd.
It's money thing too, but
not just crowds, but like sponsorship.
Yeah, sponsorship. But
that's all part of what essentially I'm going to call like brainwashing, is that alcohol companies sponsor all the sport. It's marketing. So it's a harsh way to put good marketing.
Yeah.
It's good though that they've like in certain ones that I've gone to, they've now separated like tickets where you have general admission
non-alcohol.
area and non-alcohol
Yeah,
areas.
that's a great idea.
So it's like there are ways that you can do it both ways. But
like, what are like the drunk sections? Are they going to be the ones who are starting the Mexican waves and have their shirts off and making a great time?
Yeah, but
More likely.
equally, they're also more likely to be ones that are scrapping after the match as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
And that for sure happens. I know it does happen in New Zealand, but I think it's way worse in England with these crazy fucking football matches where they go nuts.
See the movie? There's a Green Street.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole
Hooligans,
movie dedicated to, I suppose, alcohol is an essential part of that movie, but for sure, I can't remember if they do actually drink alcohol in the movie or not. But in real life, for sure, most of those guys will have been at the pub before and after the match, and that's fueling that primitive behaviour.
Yeah, and so that makes me think actually. Before we were saying about some people possibly being addicted to drugs, filling a hole that they haven't got anywhere else or can't seem to get anywhere else. Is that primitive, like violent urge though? Is there actually a real way to get rid of that isn't like physical violence, like aggressive physical violence that alcohol helps along? Like people say like, oh yeah, sports and stuff, but playing soccer isn't the same as the urge of like, I don't know if you guys are the same, but like wanting to UFC fight some like piece of shit person of the same weight rating as you. But some days I just get that. I just want to fight someone who's like me.
No, I'm fairly timid, but the answer would be that if you do have those urges, is that there are
there's outlets to
yes,
satisfy those.
But are they like exactly getting rid of that, or is there always going to be a little bit left over? That's the real violent bit. Well,
there might be, but it's like if you've, I don't know, if you got like cancer or something, you may as well try and get rid of 90% of it and keep the rest at bay, or AIDS, whatever. That's a good example, right? Or it just the HIV, it keeps it at bay. The medication doesn't get rid of it, but it keeps it at bay.
Yeah, right.
So if you can keep it at bay, that's better than like it manifesting in a bad way. So, and I'm saying, so there's probably outlets there, whether that be hardcore weightlifting or boxing or UFC. Like you can do legitimate fighting. There are legitimate fights out
Or
there.
chop some wood or something.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking like in terms of the hooligans, in a way, it seems like both parties are consenting to the violence.
Yeah.
Like they both intentionally go out to fight the opposition team. So, like, is that fine?
I don't think so.
If they're causing harm to other people, they're no good. But
it still causes harm to society, because how many of them end up in hospital? And then there's how does it affect their families? You know, if their son comes home with a broken jaw, or even worse, killed. You know, like, so it still does have a knock-on effect, even if it. And probably there are times when innocent bystanders get caught up in that as well. Probably disrupts public transport and even just blocks roads and stuff. And I don't think it's acceptable. And I think alcohol makes those urges far worse. Like those people, most of them probably can control, and not just alcohol, but also that pack environment. It's a combination of those two. Whereas, that person may have that little spark, but if he's at home with his missus, he can keep it at bay. But if he has a few drinks in him and he hangs around with some meatheads, now all of a sudden they're eating him, and it comes out in a real unhealthy way. Yeah. So that urge may be there for some people, but I think it can.
There are other ways.
Yeah, I think so for the most part. I think alcohol certainly it amplifies it. You know, you always hear these stories of the great people, but when they have a few drinks, they get violent and stuff. Fortunately, I've never had that.
No.
Alcohol's never made me violent, but
that's the person, not the alcohol either. As well,
names
probably true.
I think so.
I think it's certainly that you can't just go from being like a lovely, but I guess it shows that they're able to manage their anger when they're sober to a much better extent, where the alcohol takes the shackles off.
Well, there's always, like, for example, we have like Zach Guilford is, who's one of those players that was destined to do great things for rugby, but just could never handle the drink. And it's like cricket, you had like Jesse Ryder was another one. So it's one of those things where, like, we know alcohol just like it can really affect people, but then it's just so normalized. I'm thinking like TV advertisements, for example, like that. I think there's some good ones and there's some real bad ones. Like the comical ones, like was it the Ghost chips? Like, oh, just crash here.
That was advertising drunk driving. Wasn't it?
Yeah, so that's like yeah. So obviously, like the effects of that. There's the other one where you had like mate Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're
like
good.
you remember them, but are we treating it like it's more comical, or is it like actual serious? Like, is it serious enough? Like, if it was that serious, would we be shifting more towards like not prohibition, but like saying enough's enough? Like, as an example, like we had the referendum for cannabis. I think most
So
people
close.
thought would go through, but for whatever it didn't, and that's fine. But I think the consensus of society is like more acceptance now
Because of the referendum, do you reckon?
Possibly because of that, and most probably also because a lot of people know that alcohol is just like the effects of, I guess, smoking weed as opposed to having alcohol is like, less harmful in terms of smoking weed or whatever. But I was gonna say with this is like, would we ever get to a point where society was just like, enough's enough, we need to just like tone it down, or is it one of those things that's too far gone, or is there a tolerance for it, like it's okay, like, you know, as long as you're doing it to yourself and not affecting other people? Like, where is the middle ground there?
Yeah, well, I think, as you said, the numbers show that less and less young people are drinking, and so I think that's the key, is that
but they're replacing it with other drugs, I think.
well, they may
Like
be.
MD use, obviously. Our parents didn't have access to MD.
That's probably true, and as to me, I think that's a net positive, because a lot of those drugs have quite favourable risk profiles. Again, that doesn't mean they're harmless, but they're relatively harmless compared to alcohol. But I think the key thing is that the alcohol drinking numbers are coming down in the younger generation, and
So minimum age for drinking, do you think that could be like a playing part in it?
It's pretty good.
It'd be
it'd be
very hard to raise it. It's just one of those things where at the moment it wouldn't get close. It'd be like 80-20 against raising it.
I think that sorry.
I think if you have that again in 50 years, maybe that'll be different with this younger generation, which does seem to be, and not just drinking less, but I think viewing alcohol differently. I've read these articles where it's almost viewed in like you're a loser if you drink alcohol.
Or it's like an old person drug.
Like it's a boomer thing, which I think is good, because I think it needs to have that sort of negative reputation for it to be a sort of a sustainable move.
So almost like
for it to be sustainable.
if you've
I don't know if the
experienced
negative
it.
attitude is a great thing.
I think
for any drug.
Oh yeah.
Well, like if you
they
had like an abusive parent, or like a lot of teenagers may have grown up where they've seen like the effects of alcohol in their own family. So if you have enough of that, then obviously you'll have a generation that will grow up being more, not in favor of alcohol, but more against it.
This brings to mind, like when we're talking about drug, and we talked about our gripe with alcohol being separated from drugs, with the drugs and alcohol term. It's obviously like contextual, and another contextual use of the word drug is also to do with medicine, and drugs and medicine have massive overlap.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, drugs can be referring to, and our chat so far is referring to like mostly illicit or harmful, like casual substances. But then you can take drugs that are pharmaceuticals as medicine, synonymous, medicine and drug, and a lot of the less harmful, even alcohol, can be considered a medicine. You know, half a glass of red wine a night is considered like a medicine.
Yeah, I've
effectively.
heard that before.
It's good for you. And likewise with the drugs, where the other drugs that are very harshly illegalized and criminalized actually have far more of a medicine profile to them, some of them. Like with cannabis, like now, this is kind of like a cognitive cultural dissonance where we have the CBD oil, and that's one of however many cannabinoids that science doesn't even recognize half of them yet or know what they do, but they know that CBD is very helpful for many things. THC as well is very helpful, but I think where I was going with that was the the connotations that come with the word drug
Yeah.
is good to be conscious of.
I think the pharmaceutical industry has for a long time done a good job marketing, just as the alcohol industry has done. Obviously, we know about this more so in America than here with the opioid epidemic, where Oxy is being handed out like candy, and that's a sort of people
sold it as medicines. They're like, oh, it's all good.
Exactly. Especially, I imagine with like older people, potentially more susceptible to that. Whereas, like, oh yeah, it's my doctor. It's medicine.
Yeah, I trust my doctor.
Yeah.
He wouldn't harm me.
But yeah, and even just in general, there's these super addictive drugs which essentially do have they do have medicinal use because they are legitimate painkillers, but they also basically fit into street drugs as well, and they're highly popular street drugs in America, less so here. But yeah, they did a good job of selling it as medicine with a cute technical name.
Yeah. A scientific, official sounding name.
Well, subnote of that as well is actually New Zealand and the US are the only two countries where you can advertise pharmaceuticals on TV.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, and I know that it's way stricter here than it is in the States. And yeah, I don't think it's more the TV advertising that did that. It was just that the general perception, probably mainly fed through doctors, that this is a great drug. It's got a great no side effects. It's not addictive, which is all those things not true when we're talking about like Oxy and stuff. So I think it's not that it was marketed on TV as like, wow, ask your doctor for Oxy. It's more just that those conversations that are being had all over the country in America. Oh, you've got a bit of an ache, you've got a migraine. Oh, we'll try this. It's this great drug medicine. It's this great medicine that has no side effects. It's not addictive and all this. And treating it. Yeah, it
would be medicine here, but if you're living in the States, they'd just be referred to as drugs.
Right.
It's like go down to the drugstore or whatever.
Right, but the idea is that people are treating it as it's not like a street drug. They think a pharmaceutical drug is completely different to a street drug, and there's a lot of overlap. As I say, there are genuine medical uses for Oxy, and just as there's genuine medical use for heroin. I believe that heroin is still used in the United Kingdom. In very rare cases, same with meth. Meth is still prescribed for ADHD. Very rare cases in America. So these street drugs do have legitimate medical. So there's large overlap, and the key is that there's a sort of cognitive dissonance that as long as it comes from a doctor, it's like a completely different sort of drug than the one that you get on the street. Whereas
it's been tested. I remember one of my favorite parts of Paddy Gower, aka Paddy Carrots, is because he's big teeth. A documentary on the weed while New Zealand was considering the referendum was the scene of him interviewing a Californian grower, and in a big indoor grow house that was separated into two distinct sections. One section on the side was, it said, recreational. They had a sign, this is the recreational half, the cannabis they go for recreational, and then the other half they had the cannabis they go for medicinal, and it had the label medicinal, and kind of split the warehouse in half. And Paddy Gower, it was real underappreciated. Paddy Gower asks them, he's like, okay, so what's the difference here? Like, what's the real difference between them? And the guy's like, the sign.
Yeah. And I should also just say on that note is that in a lot of cases, especially with people who tend to get addicted to street drugs, they are, as we've heard the term, self-medicating. So they are using street drugs in the same way that a doctor would prescribe, like, and obviously, again, there's overlap because some of these street drugs are pharmaceutical drugs, like a Xanax or something. It's again, less so in New Zealand, but a common street drug in America that people with sort of undiagnosed anxiety or similar conditions get on the street. But there could also be like alternative, street drugs in there. People might ketamine. Again, this thing like ketamine is a street drug, but it's also a pharmaceutical drug that is used for treatment-resistant depression. So some people on the street might just have undiagnosed depression who are using ketamine to self-medicate. So again, there's just a huge overlap between both the pharmaceutical drug user, the one going to their doctor, and the one getting on the street, and there's a huge overlap in the drugs on the street and in the doctor's office.
And that's why the stress needs to be on education and harm reduction, because it's not necessary, obviously, it's not necessary, although it does help with some people, for the government to be involved, because people can self-medicate if they know if they understand it or are told about it and what it can do for different situations. Then people will take that on themselves, and I think they should. It's a real it's literally one of the most personal choices you can make to
definitely
mess around with your own body.
Because there's probably a lot of people out there that feel, especially probably males more so maybe than females, are too embarrassed to go to the doctor about whatever they might be, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, their struggles. They're too scared, too embarrassed to talk to someone about it. So that's it. If they could just get those drugs through a reputable source without having to go to the doctor, they might be able to deal with it rather than leaving it undealt with. Again, of course, there limitations to this because they could still end up abusing them and stuff. But yeah, just in general. I lost my train of thought.
Now it's just holding up the 1 hour, 20 minutes we've been going for.
And the other thing is that, even if they do end up going to the doctor, because there's such tight rules around some of these pharmaceutical drugs, like it's very hard to get your hands on a Xanax and stuff, and maybe that's a good thing, I don't know, but so even if they do go to their doctor, they might not be able to get that said drug, which could help them. But probably in a lot of cases it would be maybe more the sort of alternative ones, sort of these, not something that you take all the time, maybe take your mushrooms or whatever, and then that completely rewires your brain, and that can help. And it's great, I believe, that there are more scientific studies being done on MDMA, LSD, mushrooms for those,
and that's related to, although it would be a completely different podcast, because the study being done on them finally is like just starting to happen after like the hangover almost, although we're still right in the thick of it, of the war on drugs started in America. Obviously New Zealand bleeds down from America, and just yes daddy, well, whatever they do will also follow. So a lot of our like drug classifications are the exact same as there, and that's like a demonstrably racist and program operation anyway. But
crack,
that's a massive,
all that, like crack and stuff, like it's popular among African Americans, and
well, because obviously
moonshine.
That's a different pod. But we've we can talk about this phrase. We're obviously very passionate about it. I know I am.
It's one of those things you could just keep going on and on about. There'll always be extras to talk about. I had a couple things. Maybe one thing just before we finish, like culturally using alcohol, because like for example, like Fiji, they would have like kava where they drink it, like ceremoniously. So do you remember there's a place for that, or
that's kind of what we do. It's
usually is our culture just binge drinking?
I think the lines get blurred real quickly. And you'll probably find this with Fijians. I've read articles about it where there's Fijians that are heavily addicted to kava, and that's it. It quickly goes from, this is a ritual, so it's okay, to, well, now I can just drink it when I get up. I can have it with lunch. I can just have it all day.
Right.
So
that's fair.
Those things can be valid, just as it can be a valid ritual ceremony to have a glass of wine with dinner, or a bottle of champagne when you buy a house or sell a house or whatever. But you have to be careful, because then that can quickly bleed over into, now I can just have 12 beers, and so there has to be sort of a clear cutoff with those.
I think our culture is definitely also ceremonial, in that we have ceremony that, like, the milestones where it's like birthday parties, you assume drinking, because it's a celebration, ceremony celebration. New Year's Eve. It's like mostly and even if you're living for the weekend, people have just lowered the threshold for what constitutes a celebration of something or a ceremony, so they can say going to town is something worth celebrating to drink about. Even it's Friday, it's 3 o'clock. It just gets progressively smaller.
And that's the thing, I feel like they sort of get turned from like a ceremony into just an excuse to let's drink as much as possible. To me, I feel like a ceremony is sort of like a set period of time, like you say, like a glass of wine or a beer with lunch or whatever it is. You have like sort of a set amount of alcohol in a set period of time. You don't just like then say, well, yeah, it's my birthday, so I'm going to have 12 beers.
Yeah.
Like that goes from being a ceremony to just binge drinking. And a convenient excuse. That's it. We dress it up as an it's like crate day. It's just an excuse to get hammered.
Yeah, it's a fake
And-
ceremony.
Yeah.
Well,
it is
some
technically-
cultures though, it's quite like normalized the fact
like
that
Germany,
Germany, you could have
France.
Oktoberfest, or when I was traveling as younger, I went to a Burger King in Hong Kong, and you can actually drink beer with your meal. Like it'd be kind of like unheard of to think of
and
here.
my understanding is for the most part that's it. They do a good job of keeping it purely a ceremony, a ritual over there. They have like one beer with lunch. They don't, or half a glass of wine with dinner. They don't say, well, let's just have 10 bottles of wine because it's a ceremony. Yeah, it's sort of a specific period of time, ritual sort of thing. Whereas we sort of start with that concept and then just use it as an excuse to go over the top.
Yeah, I think ceremony also implies like a certain amount of consciousness to, like, and purpose to it. Like you're saying, like when you hear the word ceremony, it feels very intentional, and yeah, I think that's the most times we're going to be drinking, or the most associations we're going to have with drinking are still those landmark milestones where it's like a wedding, or like it's like a celebratory, intentional, we're going to drink to celebrate. But there's obviously a lot of bleed down into pointless.
I think they start probably with good intentions, and then it just becomes like an excuse to
But they're added to. They're not taken out and replaced by the trash ones. They're still the most important and most considered celebratory events. But I suppose with any ceremony, there's going to be misuse by.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with the like drunk driving is, like, my opinion comes from probably a naive, selfish view that like I would know myself. I feel when I back myself, I'm quite a responsible person, especially when it comes to that. Like I would naturally sit anyway about the legal limit. So in terms of what I judge myself to be able to drive in, but I think what I was getting to was that it's a personal thing, and there's always going to be dumbasses who are going to abuse anything.
I think that's the problem, is that even if we say that you are a good judge, how many people are going to be honest and say, oh, I admit that I'm a bad judge?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, we've had this conversation before. Everyone thinks they're a good driver, but obviously a lot of them are not good drivers, right? So that's it. Probably everyone thinks they're a good judge of, I'm not that drunk, but inevitably a lot of those people are not going to be good judges. They think they're good judges, and it's you may very well be, but inevitably over a large sample size, a good portion of those people, if not a majority, won't be good judges even though they think they are.
Yeah, I think that's why, it's a bit of a naive opinion, but
Well, good chats. Maybe we should celebrate hitting 10
with a glass of water.
with a glass of water.
With some crack cocaine.
No,
Some kratom.
Some kratom.
well, we've gone a little bit over time. Well,
That's just the right amount of time.
retrospectively,
I think that was definitely
to
one
the other
that's
times
easier.
we've done, but
You say I'm very passionate about
Same.
alcohol, drugs in general, knowledgeable, I think, as well. So it's one that's easy to talk about.
Could go all over again, eh?
we'll wrap it up there for this week. Thank you everyone for listening and for joining
Episode 10, double digits.
Episode 10.
Here's to 10,000 more, boys.
10,000 more. We'll
be
start with
80 years
episode
old.
11 first. We'll start with we'll wrap
That was
it up
fun.
there.
That was fun.
Yeah, it
chats.
was a good one. Peace.
All right,
Cool.
peace out everyone. Thanks
Deuces.
for listening.
Bye.